God can clean you, God can wash you, God can deliver you from iniquity. Iniquity requires observation. It's a lot deeper. I had an experience when I was young, when I was 5 years old, where a boy, a few years older than me, had some sort of sexual abuse, sexual activity, and that affected me, growing up as a child. Something I never really mentioned to my parents. They're probably watching this now, wondering, my mother watching this and wondering, oh, I didn't know that. Absolutely, it happened. And in my late teens, I started to notice that I had funny, strange feelings. I call them strange because they were just not something that was in my immediate circle, and I just noticed there was just some tendencies that I couldn't describe, and don't want to go too deep into it, but I'm sure you can understand. And of course I denied this, and but it was coming from somewhere. That abuse was a form of iniquity. Now, it wasn't any fault of my own. Why should I bear the responsibility? But the facts are, a lot of people, and not everyone, but many people who have some sort of abuse tend to, in their adult years, cultivate same-sex tendencies. Now, this is not in any way criticizing anybody and saying everybody fits the same code, but I'm speaking about my experience, and I'm allowed to talk about me. Okay, I may not suit the popular conversation and how you want the narrative, how you want to define homosexuality, but in my experience, when I was 17, 18, 19, I was noticing a change within me. I wouldn't say I was homosexual, but there were some sort of tendencies that began to grow as a result of that sexual abuse. Now, I didn't know that there was I didn't tie the two things together. And you can say everything you want about conversion therapy. I don't always believe it works, but I also believe it can, in my instance, also work as well. If you were sexually abused, if it's not something you've inherited from your forefathers, that requires, you can, you can point to it. You can point to where that started off from. I was sexually abused, and that affected me in my later years. So it's not just like, there is a cause and effect. So the only way to obviously bring some sort of conversion in this case would be to then sort of reconcile my past, to reconcile what happened to me as a child. See, iniquity is very, very different. And these spirits, Satan is very evil. Satan will make a child be raped and then follow and hunt that child down all the way to her or his death by bringing more and more abusive people towards their life. Satan is quite evil. You would think, oh, that child has suffered, leave her alone. No, he goes after the weaknesses. He goes after weak people, people who have been abused, people who have problems, and inflicts more damage upon them. He really likes to destroy. That's why Jesus Christ defined him as the thief who comes to steal, to kill, and to destroy. Why would he bother destroying someone that looks fit? He looks for someone who has suffered, and he's always trying to look for an avenue. That's why it's very important to watch your kids and to be aware about your kids and to do the best you can to preserve them. Now, obviously, I look back at my father's childhood. He was also abandoned as a kid. His parents abandoned him. For many years, he was living with, cousins and all sorts. I don't know what happened to him, but, my parents didn't abandon me. But in that moment where I was playing, there was something coming from my ancestry that was able to affect me, where in that moment, there was sort of a spirit of abandonment that allowed that older child to abuse me and sexually abuse me. And that was then responsible. It didn't show for many years. It just wasn't anything on my radar. I didn't even remember it until this day. I came into a church in London. My former pastors, Reverend Vaughan and Pastor Jennifer Brown, and I remember the man of God speaking about this particular subject, and he said, some of you have suffered abuse in your childhood. You need to go past, you need to go back and forgive. And I remember that, and I felt anger. I felt all kinds of different emotions towards this person. But in that instant, I was able to relive the past. You see, you can't patch over the past. You need to uncover it. Look at the emotions you feel and then forgive. So you need to deal with the past in the present. And you then need to forgive in the present to go into the future. So look at the past, consider it, then in your present, forgive that past. And then go into the future. And that's exactly what I did. Now, I didn't do it because I necessarily wanted to get rid of those tendencies, but I did it because I wanted to forgive what happened. But what I can say is that that's the way I was converted. You see, so it was sort of like a double sexuality I had in my late teens. And some of my friends noticed it. The slight little differences and slight little things changes. And there were changes within my desires, uncontrollable changes within my desires. Now, obviously we think, well, that's not fair. But life is not fair. Yes, I was sexually abused, and yes, by a boy, by same sex, and that same spirit that caused that abuse was haunting me in later years to fulfill the continuation of that abuse. Sad but terrible. Satan is evil, and only through reliving that past, going back, praying, where I broke down and I cried and I was angry and I was, I felt the fear, I felt the abandonment, the fear. I relived it in my, almost 14 years later. I was able to relive that past. I was able to forgive that individual. I was able to ask God to help and to forgive and come into my life. Was I able to set myself free from that demon of the past? Now, like I said to you, homosexuality is very complex. This is my story. It's not everybody who has the same sort of story, but that's my story. That's my own confession. I'm not here to criticize anybody. I'm just speaking about my experience. And based on that, that Saturday afternoon, when I was able to forgive that guy, I was able to ask God to help me to come out of that that situation of anger and just confusion. And as a child, it's only afterwards that I was then just I did not even consider the sexual part, but that tendency, that homosexual desire, then completely left. It just left, and it's 22 years later, I've never felt that way again. It just not, and that's my story. Now, maybe this can come as some sort of, I don't know, some sort of help to someone else or not. I'm not politicizing. I'm not pushing my ideas on you about your sexuality, but I'm speaking about my own testimony. And that's all we can do in Christ, is to testify about our own experience, testify about how things have happened in our own lives. I'm not telling someone else's story. I'm not telling you what to do or what to believe or what not to. If you don't believe in gay conversion theory and you think it should be banned, you have a right under a political structure that allows and permits your freedom of speech, your freedom to vote, but I'm speaking about my testimony. And if I was a one-man island, I would of course determine, but I'm not. This is my own testimony, my own experience, which I'm sharing with you guys. So obviously it's a form of iniquity. These things can be passed on from generation. Abandonment can be passed on. Feelings of rejections, insecurity can be passed on from generation to generation and manifest itself in different areas of one's life. So in someone's life, it can manifest in a different way. But it's when you look at the root, the iniquity is still the same. It's still the same root that leads to different manifestations in several generations.